We're ready?
Ready when you are.
We're ready. Good morning. This is the Public Safety Committee. I'm Councilman Smith, Chairman, joined by Mr. Zine and Mr. Cardenas, Vice Chair. And we'll take up the following items if there are no objection. Items 1 and 15 would be continued. There are discussions. I think the Commission is still taking up parts of item 1 next week, or this week, is it, Mr. Tefank? You have a report back coming back on some of the stuff on item 1 still, on photo red light. Commission?
Yes, sir. There's a report on commission tomorrow related to the Councilman Zine's motion about the traffic collisions at intersections. That'll be transmitted Wednesday to the body.
So we'll put this off until April 5th. All right, we'll put this off until April 5th and bring the whole matter back with that report. Then thank you. And then item 15 as well, if there's no objection.
Right.
Okay, and I propose the following items would be on consent. If there, yes.
I'm sorry. Did you have item number 1 be continued until next week?
April 5th.
Okay. I think the problem, and I'm not sure what the nature of the discussion was with you, the concern is the fact that the current contract is going to be expiring April 3rd. The new contractor has not been paid since August. So it might be a good idea to approve the CAO report, authorizing that the contract be extended through the end of the fiscal year, and then April 5th, we can come back with the other issues.
Well, I know Mr. Zine and I have considerable problems because we've had problems with this since the day the thing was awarded. I would have no problem with saying we could authorize today the payment of back monies because those, obviously, they're deserving of. Yeah. Well, there's a new company that's stepped in.
So why don't we just hear item 1 right now, and then we can continue it if there's no conclusion to the discussion? Because we're not on item 1 right now, right?
No, we're just talking about the agenda. All right, we'll hold on. We'll hear number 1, then we'll just continue number 15. We'll call number 1 in a bit then. All right. Then let's look towards items 4 as a consent. Items 8 through 11, which are awards, and item 14 and 16.
14 and 16, you said?
14 and 16, not 15.
Move those items.
Okay, Mr. Zine?
Second.
Okay, all those items will be approved on consent, and we'll go back to the agenda then and start off with item number 1.
Item number 1, City Administrative Officer and Board of Police Commissioner reports relative to assumption of contract from Nestor Traffic Systems Incorporated by American Traffic Solutions Incorporated and the city's automated photo red light program pursuant to motion Zion Smith.
Department? Ms. Gibson?
When you and Zine are done, I have some questions.
Had a lot of questions. Okay, so, June, your point is we owe them money through today, back to when, August?
Well, I think the concern is whether or not the committee agrees that the program should be continue unabated until such time as the matter is considered as a matter of policy and budget as part of the budgetary process. Because my understanding is that the program has not ceased as a result of the transfer of the contract from Nestor to ATS. That being the case, it would seem that we owe the contractor for the services rendered. If it is the committee's decision that you want to only continue the contract, I'm just randomly going to say until the end of April, then there is no program. So if you decide as a policy matter that you want to release a new RFP, that process will take probably at least a year. Again, do you want to continue the contract in the future? Do you want to continue the contract in next fiscal year? Do you want to release a new RFP? It would seem that the CAO's recommendation to authorize the contract through the end of the fiscal year during such time as the program could continue, and it could be considered as part of next fiscal year's budget considerations.
Okay, well, on that point, let me just zero in on that. As Vice Chair of the Budget Committee, my concern is this contract, which was designed to be revenue neutral, is not. Is that correct? It's costing us money. It's not revenue neutral at this point?
That's correct. Currently, the money that comes in from the courts is split between the general fund and the traffic safety fund. The traffic safety fund doesn't pay for what was formerly the Nestor contract. If we change the allocations within the traffic safety fund and the traffic safety fund now funded the contract, then it would be cost neutral. And that's how we have to solve this issue through the formal budget process, to get the allocations there.
What is the shortage on a monthly basis?
$150,000
A month.
a month.
And we're laying off 4,000 people because we don't have even $100,000 to play with at this point. That's my concern. So, I never loved this I mean, the department well knows, Mr. Zine and I opposed this contract in the very beginning. We thought it was a bad contract. It continues in my mind to be a bad contract. We're losing money on it when it's supposed to be revenue neutral. At a time, we're laying off 4,000 people because we don't have enough money, and we're going to continue a contract that's not performing. I have a hard time with that from a budget point of view. From a public safety point of view, I understand always has been the role of this was to provide for public safety and keep people from running red lights. That's a noble effort, but if it's costing us money that we don't have at this moment, can we afford to continue it? And that would be my question. So let me turn it over to Mr. Zine. I know he's really been the lead on this.
Thank you. How many units are in operation now?
You talking intersections?
Yes.
32.
32? I thought we only authorized 16. When did it extend to 32?
Last year's budget.
Because the original was 16. There was discussion about 32. Who gave authorization to enhance it to 32?
Well, City Council back in 2005, November 2005, authorized 32 intersections to be equipped with automated photo enforcement, photo red light cameras.
So there's 32 locations that are currently in operation.
Yes, there's 8 in each bureau.
And of the 32 locations, we are losing $150,000 a month that we're paying the vendor and we're not receiving in fines from the courts.
No, we're still receiving fines from the court. We just haven't paid the vendor since September of last year, August, September of last
I
year.
understand that, but I'm talking about the $500 citation that people receive for a photo red light if they choose to go to traffic school. Out of
Yes.
those dollars, we are still at loss. If we were to pay the vendor, we're still losing $150,000 a month? Is that what I heard from the CLA's office? Because he mentioned $150,000. Is that $150,000? Is that based on what we're paying out versus what we're receiving?
It's the general fund impact. The
So
program.
how much are we receiving on the citation? On a $500 citation, we're getting $158, I understand.
Yes.
We get
That's not enough to pay.
We get $157 for a $450 ticket. The split for the city is 40% to the traffic safety fund and 60% to the general fund. Can I make a comment about a bit of confusion with respect to the amount of revenue that we receive?
But it's supposed to be cost neutral, though. Let's try and focus on that part.
Okay. If I can just go back, to my recollection of when the CAO report was originally transmitted to council. My recollection was that the CAO at that time was estimating that not only was the program not going to be cost neutral, my recollection was that the CAO anticipated that the city was going to suffer a loss based upon their projections of the revenues that were going to be received. And the police department's position was that this was intended to be a traffic safety program, that was the value of implementing the program. Looking through the history of the revenues that have been received for the first several years, the police department, I'm sure, will agree that the city did suffer a significant loss. Within the past year or so, and maybe a couple of years just to be liberal, the program has been doing better. The CAO indicated to me a couple of weeks ago that, frankly, trying to get information from the Superior Court as to the amount that we actually receive for the program has been not very precise. The revenues that they receive from the court is based on the total court fines received. Only recently did we get information from the Superior Court that provided a specific breakdown of the revenue that we receive for photo red light.
And if someone does community service, we don't receive anything. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
And more people, I understand, are opting for community service because of the fine. So that's a greater loss. I'm not talking about the aspect, and I'll get into that issue of the A's and K's, the major injury fatals, but as far as the cost revenue neutral, which is what was supposed to be the form for this, and as Mr. Smith has said, we both had great reservations, wrote a letter to the police commission, which they didn't do anything about, saying that we really concerned ourselves with the company that was getting the contract, whether they were a viable company, whether they're going to stay in business. And it turns out we were correct. They didn't stay in business. They folded. They went to receivership. So we're very critical because we did some research to find out that the company that had that contract was on the verge of bankruptcy, and it went that way. So now we have a new vendor who could be as great and wonderful as can be, but we're still skeptics. And now we're finding out a greater financial loss. And then the other question I have for the police department is, how is that done with the A's and K's? Where are we with the major injury fatal collisions at the 32 locations?
Well, since the program started back in April of 2006, the program has had no red light fatalities at any of its 32 intersections. Last year, we also saw a decrease of serious injury traffic collisions by 11%. Injury-related traffic collisions were down 11.8%, and complaint of paying traffic collisions, there was no change.
And what about Mr. Goldstein's report that had concerns about rear-end collisions at those locations?
That will be going to Police Commission tomorrow, Council Member, and once it works through the process, then it'll come up to public safety.
Because that folds into this too,
Yes.
whether the continuation of this process or not. So, Ms. Gibson, you're saying that we're losing money, and
No, I'm not saying that. The CAO is saying that, and I'm frankly not. We haven't had a chance to really talk about the information that we received from the Superior Court.
okay.
I provided information to the CAO Finance Group last week, and bless his heart, Jason was able to put, a CAO report together in a day because we wanted to get this matter before this committee, because we are concerned about the fact that the contractor has been working without a contract since last August. They are entitled to be paid. So we would like the contract to move forward so that they can get paid.
Now, where do we get the $3.12 million to pay for the contract?
It was part of the department's original 2009-10 budget allocation. That's the tricky part right here.
The police department?
It goes into the police department's contractual
Aren't they
service.
$80 million over budget right now?
In their salaries account, yes, they are.
So where's the $3.12 million coming from?
In their contractual services.
And they have money
appropriate.
in that
Yes, they
account?
do. The issue with the way we have the program set up now is that the general fund bears the brunt of running the program. We pay the salaries for the police officers, and we pay for the contract out of the general fund. When the revenue comes back into the city, it gets split between the general fund as well as the traffic safety fund. If we were to put an appropriation for the police department in the traffic safety fund to pay for this contract, then we can make it cost neutral. It's just not cost neutral at this time.
Okay, and what is the traffic safety fund?
It has an $8.5 million appropriation for street services and a $7.2 million appropriation for DOT. And they each run programs out of there. So for street
Wait,
services.
street resurfacing?
Street services.
Oh, street services.
Maintenance and improvement construction at the intersections is an allowable cost under this fund. So
Okay,
they
well,
could,
what does the police department do with the money? I'm not talking about DOT.
well, the police department doesn't get any of the revenue coming back.
So the traffic safety fund strictly goes to enhance engineering safety on the roadway?
Currently, yes.
Nothing for enforcement or anything of that arrangement?
Not in the police department.
Okay,
If we change that, then we can make this cost neutral.
I see. And then the police department could use that for their purposes and not DOT, or they would split it? If
Well,
we're talking about changing the formula, that's a whole other
if
issue.
in the budget process, what we would do is we would request an appropriation for the police department from this fund, which would go towards paying the contract. And then that way, the revenue that comes in from the photo red light program would go towards the expenditures for the photo red light program. Currently, since they don't get an appropriation from the traffic safety fund, this revenue goes for other purposes. And then the department eats the cost of running these contracts.
Okay.
And I think that goes to the issue of having this matter considered as a matter of policy and the budget, during the budget process, because you're taking away funding from another department for traffic safety and trying to balance the...
And DOT needs that to do what they need to do for engineering on the roadways. So if this comes out,
Part of the money for they use part of the money for crossing guards.
so if that comes away, then you're going to have another huge gap. So obviously, there's a lot of unanswered questions. I don't think we can resolve them with the information we have today. So I know that we should pay the vendor. Apparently, the money's there to pay the vendor.
The money is there to pay the vendor through the end of the current fiscal year. What we had requested was extending the contract through the end of the fiscal year so that we could pay the vendor for the services rendered up until today, and then also give us the opportunity to look at whether or not we're going to be able to reappropriate some of the funds in the traffic safety fund to the police department. If we're unable to do that, we're going to have to find the $1.2 million in order to make this program cost neutral. If we cannot find that money, then it will be a policy decision about whether or not we're going to continue this program next year.
And if you can't find that money within the police department, which is already $80 million over budget, then you default to the reserve fund, which is already in trouble.
And I know the chief wants to maintain 9963 with sworn members of the department. I don't think he's willing to make sacrifices in that to give money up for something else.
That is correct.
So, I mean, there's only so much to go around.
Yeah, the
No,
contract.
there's nothing to go around. You haven't read the
Well,
papers.
we have been going around.
The contract allows for a 30-day opt-out clause, so we can opt out with 30 days' notice.
Can you say an RFP is going to take a year?
It will probably take at least 6 months.
Okay, how many vendors are out there now doing photo red light?
At least 10.
10?
Yes, sir.
And we have one at this time. And the majority of the cities in Southern California, what are they using right now? Culver City, Beverly Hills, Inglewood?
It all depends. It varies from agency to agency.
So it's spread with the 10 different vendors.
Exactly.
Okay.
And for the record, we've been joined by Ms. Perry. Mr. Cardenas?
Yeah. Answer this question as simply as you can. Of the money that's coming to the city as a whole, if we didn't make a policy decision to split that money, could that revenue pay for the program?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councilmember Zine, I just asked the question, of all the money that's coming to the city, if we didn't have this policy in place where we bifurcate the money and send it to two different places, if we just sent the money to a place where it would pay for itself, then there's enough money. Basically, it would pretty much break even right now, give or take. It's not an exact science. But the reason why the revenue looks like it doesn't pay for itself is because we've decided to use the money as it comes in for two different things.
Well, not entirely, in that it probably should have been allocated to the police department budget rather than the general fund, which would be a clearer distinction between the two. But the general fund carries much of the cost for the pension system and related cost of officers that work on the program. So it has always been the theory, and I'm not that I subscribe to it, but it's always been the theory of the city that we reserve certain amounts of monies from departments that do stuff, grants and other things, to pay for the related cost of running the city government, which relates to what those departments do. I've always thought that it's much cleaner if you just say, department, you do that, and all that money goes to you because you do that, and then you can easily account for it better. That's my personal opinion.
Including benefits and other related costs?
Yeah, and it's much, from an accounting point of view, it's much cleaner. CAO hates that idea, by the way.
And Mr. Cardenas, if we did something like that, then you'd have DOT concerned about traffic.
Oh, no. I'm not saying that it's a bad policy decision to actually use the money for different things, whether we split into two places or 10 different places where we legitimately have the need and where we're using the money wisely. I don't question that at all. But the thing is, I think that that it needs to be clear, because people are listening to this, that this red light program is woefully short by $150,000 a month. Actually, it's not short by $150,000 a month. We're just choosing to use a good portion of that $150,000 each month for something else.
But it's related to the program, and if anything, I think the numbers should be reversed. It should be 60%. 40% of the cost of an employee is borne in the benefit side. So if we're taking 60% from the general fund, it really should be 40, not 60. It should be reversed. Then you're covering the related cost for an employee, which is what the general fund does.
But how many employees, I know, Sergeant, you're in charge from the department's perspective. Each division has how many folks? Because it's all automated process. How many folks in each traffic division?
I have one P3 in each of the traffic divisions, along with a P2 who is a floater to fill in for when officers are on vacation, long-term IOD, sick IOD, things along that lines.
So 2 officers per division?
One officer per division with one extra.
Okay.
So 5 total, 6 including me.
And we got 4 traffic divisions.
Yes.
So any other administrative costs from the police department side? Or personnel costs?
Yes, it would be accounting personnel from fiscal operations division.
No, I'm talking police department side?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We have a senior
They're-
accountant too, as well as an accounting clerk too.
Okay.
They're assigned part-time to the program.
And that's it for personnel?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then the other option is with the vendor, whichever vendor that may be, to negotiate a contract where they don't receive the same amount of money, the 3.2, because I know we've gone to different contractors and asked them to reduce their fees to the city.
You're stealing my thunder, Mr. Zine.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just getting ready to
Go ahead.
Gosh.
Go ahead.
Great idea, Mr. Cardenas.
Jeez.
Mr. Cardenas, it's all yours.
Well, in part of the report, because before I got to that point, because people are listening, maybe even the press, isn't part of the recommendation that if we were to extend the contract, that we would forego, that the contractor and us would forego the disputed amounts, or some kind of disputed amounts in the
That is
past?
correct.
Yeah. And what is that value of that if they just say, okay, fine, we're not going to argue with it anymore, you get your way, city?
We had withheld about $700,000 from Nestor based on the performance of the intersection. The city attorney had opined that based on the terms of the contract, they hadn't fulfilled their role as the photo red light contractor, so we did not pay them for the intersections which were underperforming per the contract.
Okay, so basically in your recommendation, if we were to extend the contract, and I know we're not going to do that today because there's still more information coming. It doesn't look like we are, because there's more information coming. But that caught my attention, $700,000, if the vendor's willing to forego that for, if we were to extend it for 1 year so they can get back to business and then start getting paid more regularly, but they're willing to forego $700,000? We anticipate they're willing to forego $700,000, or?
They have verbally stated to the department and staff that they are willing to forego that.
And obviously, if we extended it upon our signature and their signature, it would not be extended if they don't agree with that, correct?
The city attorney drafted wording into the amendment to extend the contract that they would forego that. So by signing the agreement to extend the contract through the end of the fiscal year, they would forego that $700,000.
Okay, now, my next question is, where do we stand with this contract comparable to other contracts as far as the amount and/or percentage that this particular vendor has with us in our current contract? As far as, is the percentage on the high side that they're getting? I mean, this was the first time I think we did a contract like that. Did we get taken, or are we at the average? Where are we at?
When we negotiated the contract with the original contractor, Nestor, the city got a great deal. And the reason why the city got a great deal was Department of Transportation did all the design and all the construction. Normally with photo red light contractors with smaller agencies, the contractor has to do all the design and construction. But because the city did all of that, that cost was covered, and the cost that the vendor charged us was much lower than what would have been done for any other city. So we got a really good deal. The city got a really good deal for our cost that we pay per month.
So being that they didn't have to fold in those recovery costs.
Yes.
we got a lower rate
Yes,
in which we pay them per occurrence.
Yes.
Per month, et cetera.
yes.
So, as it stands right now, the contract looks good, comparable to the way contracts
Yes.
are in other jurisdictions?
Yes. Looks excellent. We've got a real good deal.
Yeah, if somebody want to add something, please do.
The other thing I'd like to add is that since American Traffic Solutions purchased Nestor Traffic Systems last year, we've seen an increase in the citation issuance rate. When Nestor had the contract last year from January through August, we saw an 81.7% citation issuance rate as compared to September through February of this year of 82.8% with the citation issuance rate. So we've seen an increase with that percentage.
So, we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place on past activity. But I don't see how somebody would honor that foregoing of $700,000 if we just passed, if we gave the authority to go ahead and sign a contract just going forward for a few more months. I can imagine that $700,000, they'd be willing to forego that if we gave them another year of doing business with the city. I'm sure that question probably hasn't been asked to them. If we extend it through July 1st or September 30th, would you still forego that? I doubt it, but...
In order to take assignment of the contract, they would actually have to forego that based on the language the city attorney has drafted.
That's the only language we have right now, them foregoing that money.
They were willing to forego that money based on getting assignment of the contract from Nestor through the end of the current contract term, independent of extending it for an additional full year.
Oh, really? So
The option lies with the department to extend the contract for a year. What the CAO's office was recommending is that instead of extending it for the full year, only extend it through the end of the budget season in order to give us time to see whether or not we can reallocate.
And if we did that, they would still forego the $700,000?
Yes.
May.
That was the condition of their transferring, being able to accept the transfer of the contract.
Not the worst deal in the world.
No,
I mean,
no.
Especially since most of those months of activity have already occurred.
Yes. They've been performing per the contract since September 8th, and they have not received a dime from the city. So really, they're waiting to get payment for all these months of service. That money has already been put into the department's account, and it's sitting there waiting to actually get paid out. And until the contract gets assigned to ATS, the controller will not release a check to them to pay them for those services.
How much is waiting to be paid out, inclusive of that $700,000, or we already discounted that $700,000?
We already discounted that.
1.2 million is actually owed.
How much?
1.2 million is actually owed the vendor.
Okay. Now, if we continue to dispute with them, basically, up to date, they would be disputing that it's not 1.2, it's 1.9?
No. The dispute was with Nestor. So when ATS bought Nestor from the court system for $7.5 million, my understanding was that they already knew that money wasn't coming to them.
So that was already a loss on the company that they bought.
Well, it wasn't necessarily a loss. The intersections.
Excuse me. I'm Terry Martin Brown, Assistant City Attorney, and I'd just like to add, if I may, that when ATS bought Nestor, they did not accept the fact that that $700,000 plus was a loss, and that was still something that was negotiated. They were still maintaining that they were owed that amount, and they had it showing on their books as an account receivable. So it is possible that if the contract is not extended, they may want to go back and revisit that. Technically, the city would be arguing that, we had a deal that they verbally agreed to.
Yeah, but verbals don't matter in
Exactly.
this magnitude. I think it's less than $500 of verbal,
Well,
or less than so many months of a contract. I mean,
we don't have their signature on the dotted line.
That's my point. That verbal means nothing until we get a signature on the dotted line, right?
Yes.
Are you talking ATS or Nestor?
ATS,
They bought a company, they went into receivership,
right.
and then the bills that rolled to Nestor automatically rolled over to ATS? Or is that Nestor's responsibility?
Nestor
They bought a company that obviously had outstanding debt.
and assets.
Yes.
Yes.
So
They
they've got
assume the
both the
assets.
debts and the assets. But they also sort of inherited Nestor's position that they were owed this money by the city. And the city has continued to maintain that because of Nestor's failure to perform as specified in the contract, that Nestor was not owed that $700,000 plus.
So there is that aspect of Nestor failing to live up to their contractual obligations.
Yes. And we've met with ATS staff, department staff and myself. We have this verbal agreement, basically, that they would agree to the contract amendment and forego that $700,000. But that was after, much heated negotiations and debate about it. Because they came into it feeling that they...
But that's only offered if there's an extension.
I'm sorry?
That's only offered if the contract goes through
June 30th.
through June 30th. The contract period.
Through June 30th of this year.
Okay.
I mean, they may raise the issue again, they may not.
So, Mr.
But
Chairman,
what about the aspect of Nestor not performing to the contractual standard? We have some responsibility and some recovery from that, don't we?
Well, that's why we withheld the $700,000.
Right. So
We
Nestor
didn't pay them.
didn't perform to the satisfactory contract, and then ATS comes in, and then now they want the money that was due, even though it wasn't, well, we don't believe they performed to the standard. So there's an argument to be made there. Nevertheless, they're willing to say, you give us this contract to the end of June, and we'll forgive that $700,000.
Pretty much that's it.
Okay.
Our quarrel with Nestor basically was that they underperformed at several intersections.
Right.
And that was the basis on which I advised the department that the city should withhold those funds.
Thank you.
Does this go to budget and finance as well? Is it a dual? Nope.
No, sir.
So it's just us, huh?
because all the money's already been
Yeah.
allocated and
Yeah.
budgeted. Well, Mr. Chairman, I think in light of the fact that we don't have all the information to make long-term decisions on this, and the fact that the work is being performed, we owe them something unless we formally ask them to stop working.
Give
Okay?
30
We haven't asked them, but we haven't exercised our right to give them that 30-day notice of saying, that's it. After 30 days, turn off your machine, send your people home, do whatever you want. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. We haven't done that, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so the fact of the matter is, even from today forward, they're still going to be performing some work for 30 more days. So we are going to be cutting this company a check for some money, whether this committee does nothing or does something. So, Mr. Chairman, I would make the motion that we adopt what was the CAO's report?
The CEO's report was to assign the contract to ATS and then extend the contract through the end of the fiscal year.
Which is June 30th,
Which is June
2010, that we adopt that as a motion in this committee, and obviously in light of the fact that they're willing to forego the disputed amount of $700,000, whether we feel that we are 90% correct or what have you, or have a better than 50% chance of winning that argument, this is the best way for us to guarantee that we're not going to pay a penny of that $700,000.
As much as possible, yes.
Yeah, and then our attorneys can spend their time doing other things.
The department, as well as the Department of Transportation, has requested that we also add a recommendation to give the chief of police the opportunity to extend the contract further, because the RFP will take 6 months. So if after June 30th...
Absent that clause, just for us to adopt just the extension of June 30th and all the related benefits of that recommendation, such as the them willing to forego the $700,000, et cetera, but you give this committee, the policymakers, to make the subsequent longer-term decisions about whether or not we're going to go out to RFP, whether or not we're going to give the chief authority, et cetera, et cetera. We can deal with that on another day.
Particularly because some of that report's yet to come back from the commission next couple of weeks. So that's I think, a wise way to go. And then I would add to that June and Jason, that you make sure that there's a footnote in the budget presentations beginning next month, whenever we begin, that the budget committee fully get briefed on this as part of the budget, because otherwise it can kind of slip through. So I want to make sure that we footnote that from Mr. Parks' committee.
Was it 700 or 750? The total, 7 or 750? That they were going to forgive? That they were going to forgive, 7 or 750?
700.
700. Okay.
So that,
Council members, for clarification, are you going to approve the CAO recommendations in their entirety?
no, we're going to approve the recommendation to extend the contract through the end of the fiscal year and not anything beyond that
End of this fiscal year.
this fiscal year.
Very good, sir.
Councilmember Smith, could we recommend this goes forth with the council?
Certainly.
Thank you.
But it's not to include the continuation past that?
That's correct.
At the
That's
choice of the
Language
chief?
referring to
Further-
RFPs or contracts or chief giving the authority to do so, all that
Right.
is not in what we've adopted.
So we get to have that discussion. We'll have that discussion on April 5th when we get the report back from the commission on the other element of it, and then we'll footnote it in the budget so that we have a clearer definition in the budget and the funding sources relationship. I want to make sure we understand in the budget how that's done. So that'll be the order. All right, thank you very much. Next item. Let's skip, if I can skip to item number 5, and then we'll do number 6, and then we'll go back to number 2.
Item number
5.
6, I'm sorry, sir.
Go ahead.
Item number 6, Department of Animal Services report.
5.
Oh, I'm sorry. Item number 5, motion Smith Zine requesting that the city attorney prepare an ordinance to enable the police department to change market rates for training charge market rates for training classes and other related services provided to other public agencies through the police training program.
Okay. Chief MacArthur, welcome. This has been a lot of discussion in the working group for the committee members. If you have any questions, this is the opportunity to do that. Basically, it's a recommendation on the department's part that we draft an ordinance that would allow them to basically hire out our services to other municipal agencies or private agencies as well that have a government function.
Yes, an example is, for instance, USC. They're looking for us to train all of their security officers and charge them to do so. So
They're public safety officers?
Public safety, yes.
They're an 830.3?
830.3, yes.
Yeah, I agree that they should be allowed the authority to do that, yet at the same time, I don't know if we already have in place an ability to analyze all the costs of running the facilities and of the training in general, and how much of that cost is actually being applied to people who are being trained to work for the city and/or third parties, so that we can look at it and see what the cost effectiveness or efficiencies are or not in doing so.
We're actually looking at all of that right now. We know we have a market for it. Right now, budgetary issues is always a concern, because if we're struggling, so are other departments at this time. But we're actually putting together a breakout, because we know the maximum number of students we allow in the class, and there's very many in-service classes that we could set aside a certain amount of seats, so we can get the exact cost that we would have all the way down to the cost for each instructor. So we're working on that right now. We're working with the state police officer standards and training, because they set the standards for the tuition that you can charge, so we know we're not charging over what any other agency would be charging.
Now, I think it's Rio Hondo that already does this, probably more than anybody else in Southern California.
Some of it.
They do some of it, yes. We've looked at Rio Hondo. One of the places that really actually does a lot of this is in San Luis Obispo. They do a lot of it, and it is not, it's affiliated with the junior college, but it's not at the junior college campus. So we also were able to get quite a bit of cost information from them. So we're working on putting together an entire report on this. But we are working with the junior college as well, and College of the Canyons, who also does some of this.
Is that CSTI?
Yes, it is.
Okay. That's state-funded, though, isn't it?
It's state-funded, but they charge, it's post-Plan 1, they charge tuition, which is what we don't charge right now.
Right.
And
for the benefit of the committee, why don't you tell them the differentiation of what the city attorney's original opinion was and what we could charge versus what the market will allow legally?
yes, the original opinion was that we could charge only the cost recovery, but not even for our employees. There's no tuition. It was minimal what we could charge. So what happens is other agencies, as Rio Hondo does, as California State Institution, State Standard for Training, sorry, CSTI.
California State Training Institute,
Thank you.
CSTI.
What they do is they charge a tuition on top of everything else. Post expects agencies to do that, because the tuition is where you start to pay for the instructors and some of the regular fees that, for materials and things like that. We were never allowed to do it per our ad code. So we're looking right now, working with the city attorney to change that so we can be competitive, not charge more, but charge what these agencies currently charge. Because we have a lot of people who are interested in coming to training in from LAPD, and we have the training sites available, especially with our training, our hiring plan. So we have the ability to do this, but we've never had the means because of the ad code.
And the difference was you could charge up to maybe like $20 a student right now.
Correct.
But you could charge up to $1,000 under the new rule.
Yes, an example for our rifle instructor school, we could charge $2,000 per student. But we don't have the ability to do that today.
Okay. So basically, the state allows to charge up to a certain amount. Our local codes have restricted us from being able to venture into that area of charging that amount or up to that amount.
That's correct.
We were limiting ourselves.
We were limiting ourselves, yes.
So that's part of what this motion would do, is allow ourselves to evaluate and change our code so that we could actually do so should we choose to do so.
That's correct.
All right.
And we do train, I know that Academy trains officers from other jurisdictions, detention officers. Would this apply to them also, or is that already on a different formula?
That would also apply, where we can have a better cost recovery.
And what about West Point leadership? How does that work?
That, right now, it is not a post-plan one, and that would be one where we could certainly charge tuition. We have several, as you all know, several classes. Our sergeant school, our supervisor school is another class. When people come, we don't charge them. And so this gives us opportunity to make revenue for the city in particular, to help us recover costs for the cost of instructors.
So we've maintained the programs where we instruct the different personnel from different agencies. We just haven't taken that cost recovery to the level we can.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Very good.
All right. Thank you very much, Chief. Appreciate bringing it forward. And Mr. Carden said, great idea. I just want to make sure that everyone knows it was Chief MacArthur who brought this idea forward. So thank you to the department. That'll go forward with approval. Item number 6. Oh, on that, if I could add one other thing, for the city attorney, when you draft this, could you see that the revenue goes back to the police department instead of the general fund? Thank you.
Who's drafting this particular matter?
Yeah, it's whoever they assign.
We don't know, but I'll take a note.
Okay, there's,
That's part of the
Yeah,
ordinance,
yeah.
that it goes
For a
into the
change.
police department fund.
Yeah.
along those lines, just to save you a lot of extra work, I met with the fire chief last week, and he informed me that they don't train anyone from any outside jurisdiction, and they want to look into that. So if we could combine this with the fire service, we could train paramedics, we could train firefighters in service classes like they do with law enforcement. LA City Fire, according to the fire chief, doesn't train anyone from the outside, but they're looking into doing that. And if they do, if you could have this ordinance apply to police and fire, any other agency
And
within
maybe
the city.
emergency operations as well.
Emergency, I mean, if we can do it, we might as well do it and train those people. We have the cadre, but we don't do
I
it.
don't remember the specific administrative code section that speaks to this, but it might be general in nature, so that the motion that's now been approved.
All of the training facilities
Right.
/ academies that the city owns and or operates, we should
All of them.
Doing
make
that.
sure that we upgrade our ordinances to make sure that they can all,
So,
not that they will, but that
Yeah.
they can.
so if it's one section of the admin code, great. If not, bring back multiple changes then. All right, that'll be the order.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Item number 6.
Item 6, Department of Animal Services report requesting that the city attorney prepare an ordinance to establish penalties for violations of proposed animal transfer permit requirements.
Good morning, council members. Linda Barth from LA Animal Services. What you have before you is really sort of a technical correction or addition to legislation that's been moving through the system for about 2 years to create a transfer permit. When our board approved and sent to council the original language, what we recommended was creating a transfer permit for animals that would be basically just follow the same lines, mirror the breeding permit for animals for situations in which someone says, well, the animal was bred outside the city and I'm just bringing it in to sell it. What we didn't realize is that because the breeding permit, the penalties really require them to just get a permit or sterilize the animal. That didn't work for a transfer permit. So we went back to our board and crafted some language, and we have some specific language subject to technical correction, which I could read in if you would like. All right, so the specific language we're looking for, again, subject to final technical correction by the city attorney, would be a violation of the transfer permit provisions of this section may be punishable by a civil penalty of $250 for the first violation and $500 for the second violation in a 12-month period, or as an infraction subject to criminal penalty. Failure to comply with the terms and conditions of the transfer permit and applicable law shall also be grounds for revocation or suspension of the transfer permit.
Very good. Thank you very much. And I have no problem with that. I know Ms. Doherty's been here beating on us for years about not fining people, so we're listening. Dov, do you have any additions?
Yes, I think there was just a little confusion. Instead of or as an infraction, it would be or as a misdemeanor. The original council motion said that it would be only a misdemeanor. The staff and the commission wanted more flexibility. And I think that was just a misstatement by Ms. Barth. It should be either as a civil remedy, $250, $500, or as an infraction or as a misdemeanor.
Okay, if it was a misdemeanor only, the only people that could cite them then for that would be a police officer status 8.1 penal code officer.
I believe that our animal service officers could also cite them. It would come in through the city attorney's office.
That would be the sworn general services, but not the yellow patch.
Yes. It would only be the animal control officers that
or an animal control. Animal control are under 830.3 then? What are they under?
Only for animal-related laws.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So that covers them. All
yes.
Right. And they would go through our office, and our office would file it.
Yeah. As amended.
Yeah. Accept the amendment.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Ms. Phyllis Doherty.
Progress has been made.
Good morning, Phyllis Doherty. Thank you for that. What we're still waiting for is that the administrative citation process still has not been heard in this committee, and it's still totally tied up. So until that happens, they can't develop the form to issue that citation that we're just talking about. We don't know where it's going to be paid, and the city attorney once said that he would form the hearing program. But we can't even write the form for them to do the administrative citations until this committee brings that in and at least gets it going.
Well, and Mr. Russell, maybe you can clarify that. My understanding is we're authorizing at least on this citation to do that.
But we don't have a form to do it because there's no path for it to be paid and to be heard.
There are things that still need to be done with the administrative citations. However, there are some already on the books. The one thing that isn't in place is a due process hearing, etc. But if necessary, we can provide due process to someone who objects to the citation.
And that would be through the commission?
And that would be done through the commission.
Okay. So that process will go forward, and the citation would look like whatever you design to meet the need of the code.
Right.
From what I understood, the reason that it was said that was being held up is because the CAO and finance wanted to develop a program that would involve all city departments. So it's kind of getting bottlenecked between can we form one just for LA Animal Services and go with it, or do we have to wait until there's a set form that works for all city departments and is designed that way? So that's why if it could come into you and kind of get going, maybe, because it's been since last August.
And I should say that our office is working on an overhaul on this process. Yeah. And so it should be coming forward fairly soon.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
I just want to make one last little comment. You notice how much you're getting since Linda Barth is doing all of these things. You're getting, if that stops when we get a new general manager, please ask why.
Okay. Will do. Thank you. That concludes the item, and the committee approves it as amended. Takes us back to the regular agenda then to item number 2.
Item number 2, Board of Police Commissioners and CAO reports relative to a 2009 Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force grant award in the amount of $709,836 from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, DOJ, for the period of July 1, 2009 through June 30th, 2010.
And also, let's read item number 3 and take them both together.
Item number 3, Board of Police Commissioners and CAO reports relative to the grant Augmentation for the 2009-2010 Internet Crimes Against Children program in the amount of $125,000 from the Law Enforcement and Victim Services Division, and extending the grant term to June 30th, 2010.
Okay, thank you very much. Jason?
Jason Clean, Office of the CAO. Before you for your approval is 2 Internet Crimes Against Children grants. One is from the Department of Justice for $709,836 for the 2009 Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force Continuation Program from DOJ, and that program will run from July 1st, 2009 through June 30th, 2010. With that grant, the 2008 award was actually extended till December of last year, so this program will run for 6 months. And in doing so, we will get 70% cost recovery for a detective 3, or a detective 2, and a police officer 3, and we will get $100,000 in sworn overtime. And as for the Cal-EMA grant, we have a 2009-10 Internet Crimes Against Children Program Grant Augmentation Award for $125,000 for the period of June 30th, 2009 through June 30th, 2010, and this award will increase the total amount awarded under this grant program to $500,000.
Okay, the only question I have, and this meets with the I've been trying to establish in my mind at least a criteria for grants, because I think there's a lot of grants we waste our time on because it's just not worth our money, but this certainly is not one of them. And you get enough recovery in the 70%, that's fine. My question is, where's this been since July of last year when we started the program? Is this billable to these dollar amounts billable back to the grant, or is this the initial?
Well, what happened was we had the 2008 award, and we had to ask for an extension for that. So the extension went through December of 2009. So that grant paid for these officers through that time frame, and then this grant is going to pick up the salaries from July 1st through the end of the fiscal year.
All right, fine. Thank you.
How many officers assigned to this?
There's 12 officers, including myself. 13, including myself, sir.
So 1 lieutenant.
1 D3, 3 D2s, a couple P2s, and a couple P3s, excuse me.
So 13 total.
Yes, sir.
Now, are they all trained and experienced?
Yes, sir. We did lose 2 for the downsizing.
Then why do you need $218,459 for training and travel? That seems like a lot of money for trained personnel.
Unfortunately, the technology keeps changing, and the techniques keep changing. It's emerging technology. Recently, we had a case on MySpace. We were able to rescue the child within 8 hours. If we weren't able to understand the Harris vehicle and other tools that are available, we wouldn't have been able to get to that child within that 8 hours. Everything is continually changing. And it's also 25% of this grant does go to our affiliates for the training. We've also tried to build in some costs. There's $30,000 to Fox Valley to bring the training to us, so we can train everyone in the regional area instead of us going to them.
Where do they normally do the training?
I'm sorry?
Where do they normally do the training?
Normally, it's all over the country, sir. There's 9 different classes we have to go to, from prosecutions to forensics. Everything is in a different type of training. There's child abuse training, investigative training, chat training, and we want to make sure that we are risk adverse to the city, so we do everything in a manner which doesn't leave any liability to the city.
I know it's a huge problem on the internet, so. Okay, that's all I have.
Any questions? All right, seeing none, we'll approve the recommendation. Take us to item number 7.
Item 7, Police Department report relative to the status and activities of the supplemental police account for the period October through December 2009.
Good morning. Kevin McCarthy, Gang Narcotics Division.
Just briefly, this is an ongoing charge.
Sure.
What is the balance of that account right now?
You know, FOD's not here, but my records indicate that as of December 31st, 2009, we were down to about $11,000.
Wow. Okay. Is that declining? That's because of the allocation for the year was 1.5?
Right.
Okay.
And that was that SPA account is closing and the next one opens up.
And how about, have the forfeited assets declined any because the rest are going down, or? Do you see that being problematic for next year?
No, in that fourth quarter, we had 84 arrests. We seized over $62,000, 114,000 grams of narcotics, resulting in about $1.4 million in street value. We're seeing seizures go up and arrests actually going down, so we're getting bigger seizures.
More bang for the buck?
Yeah.
Very good. All right, thank you. Any other questions? All right, then this is a note and file. It's informational only. We appreciate the department's information, and it'll be note and file. Item number 12.
Item 12, CAO report relative to Measure B funded enhancements to the Los Angeles Fire Department Trauma Air Transport Services.
Who's up first? Chief? Mark? Mark.
Hi, Mark Davis with the CAO's office. In November 2009, the Board of Fire Commissioners approved the Fire Department recommendation for the Measure B funded enhancements to the Trauma Air Support Services for Los Angeles County. This program will provide the fire department with up to $1.3 million for this current fiscal year. The next fiscal year, $1.1 million for 2011-12, and up to $1.2 million for the past fiscal year for reimbursable expenditures, including equipment, personnel, and for training. This agreement is between the county fire, the sheriff's department, and the LA City Fire to provide air transportation services to the trauma center criteria patients in the underserved trauma areas. Those areas include East San Gabriel Valley, the Antelope Valley, and Malibu, and the pediatric air transport in the San Fernando Valley. There are 4 positions that are requested as part of this program. One assistant fire chief to fill the role of the trauma care coordinator, and 3 positions for the helicopter pilot trainees. All 4 of these positions are completely reimbursable through the Measure B program, and the indirect costs are covered through Fund 44R.
Let me ask a question. Since this is stuff that we knew was out there, was ours, was due to us from Measure B, we just hadn't collected it. Is that correct?
Correct. It took about 4 years to negotiate this agreement with the Board of Supervisors and the Department of Health Services.
Okay, so we had never budgeted this money in any other way. We just knew it was out there, but it never hit the budget yet.
Correct. We've had unfunded mandated training by DHS, and we've used the general fund to pay for that. This will reimburse us for that.
Okay.
So it'll be funded mandated.
And the only other question is why an assistant chief for this?
You know, they wanted somebody, Zev Yaroslavsky, the supervisor, and Bill Fujioka wanted somebody who oversaw both our trauma care system, our EMS system, and our aeromedical system at the assistant chief level. They wanted somebody who could, at a split decision, make a decision to transport part of the strategic national stockpile in case we were to have a large-scale pandemic via aircraft. So they wanted it at the assistant chief's level.
And your current EMS captains and...
Our current EMS is headed by a section commander or a battalion chief.
Battalion chief. And that's not good enough for them.
They wanted somebody who oversaw both of the EMS section and the aeromedical section.
I'll have to thank Mr. Fujioka for spending our money. If you would please pass it along, Mr.
I'll tell him for you.
Yeah, I'll tell him, believe me. Questions?
What does he know about city?
Yeah, what does he know about it? Yeah. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll move as recommended by the CAO then, and this will go to managed hiring. These positions go to managed hiring next?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take us to item number 13.
Item 13, Board of Police Commissioners report relative to a grant application for the 2009 Forensic DNA Unit Efficiency Improvement Program in the amount of $246,549 for the period of October 1, 2009 through March 31, 2011.
Thanks for hanging around.
No problem.
We have an amendment that's brought forward by the Police Commission that has been duly posted. Is that correct? So that's duly posted is before you as item number 13 from the Commission. Any questions?
Use it wisely.
Use it wisely. Okay. We had to call that because it was amended, so, but there are no questions, we'll move it as amended then. So do. Dean, thank you very much. Thank you. Item number 14 to consent, 15. That's last item.
Oh, no, 15 we continued.
Councilmember.
15 we did continue.
Yes, sir.
Then we're done?
Yes, sir.
General.
Adios. Anyone wishing to speak to the committee on an item on today's agenda, come forward now. Seeing none, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.